I'm Jennifer Collier, and this is my story. As a child growing up, I came from a home of alcohol, drugs, abuse. We were never really taken to church, but occasionally, if there was a church bus that came through the neighborhood, my mom was putting us on the bus, and we were going, so we were bus ministry kids. And I remember early on as a child looking at the families and just wishing and longing for that and wanting that so badly. So at 17, I started dating one of the ministers at the church, and we ended up getting married. I was very young still, but at that time, I feel like I was much older, but looking back, maybe not. And things were looking really good. And I was like, this is the life I've always dreamed of. This is it. 5 years into our marriage, we gave birth to our first child, our daughter, and my husband was involved in a car accident. And the next 6 years of our marriage was trial because he became addicted to pain medications. And it was, I would watch him time and time again, pouring the medications down, flushing them down the toilet and just crying and, asking God to help him to get past this, and because it was destroying our family. Then several years later, our second daughter came along, and by this time, our marriage was on the brinks of being over. I just didn't know who he was anymore. We were putting on the happy preacher's family face at church in front of our congregation, and at home it was a different story. And I didn't know who to talk to about because we were the pastor's family. And so one thing led to another, and our marriage ended in a very volatile divorce. I remember praying and just saying, I don't understand. My divorces, my marriage is over. My children need their father. There's nobody that's ever going to love my children like you do. I don't understand what's going on. And I said, but nonetheless, and I remember I had a letter that my husband had written me, and I held it up and I said, God, I don't know if you're going to restore him back to our family or what you're going to do, but I said, I surrender it to you. The next day was a Thursday, and I was on my way to choir practice, and I got a phone call, and it was the Seattle Police Department. They said, do you know my husband's name? And I said, yes, he's the father of my 2 children. And they said, we just found him dead in a hotel of a drug overdose. And I remember thinking, that was not at all what I expected to happen. God, I don't understand. And I just remember thinking, how? How does a person go, from where we were to where we are now? And it was a very shaky time. And as far as I didn't understand, because it wasn't the outcome that anybody had anticipated. We continued in the church and everything, and my girls were very active and in the church and all. And then one day I get a call from my oldest daughter, and she says, Mom, I need to talk to you. And I said, well, what's going on, baby? She was 15 at the time. And she said, Mom, the police are on the way to the house. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, I was sexually assaulted by one of the pastors of the church. That was the hardest phone call, aside from getting the call about their father, I've ever received in my life. I said, surely there's got to be a mistake. This cannot be true, because this was something I had vowed to protect my children from, because I knew what this felt like as a child, and I knew what it felt like. One thing led to another, and we were going through the whole process, and we reached out to the pastor of the church we were attending at the time, and trying to figure out what are we going to do? How do we handle this? And we were told, we don't want to get involved. This happened outside the church. It needs to be handled outside the church. We don't want to take sides. We don't want any part. And the congregation was told not to get involved and not to discuss anything concerning the matter. So now not only were we broken, but we were alone. And I remember a friend of mine told me about Cathedral. She said, why don't you try there? And so we left, and we made the decision. I said I had to, for the sake of my family, my children, and for myself. And the first couple of times I came to Cathedral, I sat in the parking lot, and I never made it to the door. I sat in my car, and I cried. I said, God, I know this is where I need to be. I know that I need you. I know that I can't fix these things by myself, But God, the very thing I've turned to, the very thing that I trusted, is the very thing that's caused my family the most pain and the most hurt. And how do I handle that, God? And I just knew that I still had to keep trying. And finally, I was able to make it through the doors. And so I would come. And for about the first 3 years, I sat on the pew and I was just like content to sit. I was like, I'm just here. That's good enough for me. And I just remember God showing me time and time again, it's simple. Love God, love people. You've complicated it. And He stripped away so much of what I thought I knew of Him and began to show me more of the simplicity of who He was. And at that point, I started going to some of the small groups. I was like, all right, I'll check out some of these small groups. And I remember one of the first small groups I went to was Life Recovery Group. And I remember thinking, well, shucks, if anybody needs some recovering from life, this girl needs it. And I remember that when I got to the group, I didn't realize exactly what it entailed, but it was what I needed. It was what I needed. It was steps in the right direction for me to get back on track. I needed God to remind me that I couldn't have unforgiveness or bitterness or anger or any of that and move forward, that I had to let those things go for me, not for anybody else, but for me. And I wanted it so badly, of course, for my children, but I knew I needed it for me and to be the example for them. And I know that that's where I am. That's where I am at this point. It's God saying every bit of what you've endured is so that you can tell someone else about how I was your healer because you were sick and you needed healing. I was your provider because you had nothing and I provided for you. And all these different things, it's not about just reading about it, it was about experiencing it. And so I'm thankful for where God has brought me through and from and everything that my experiences in life. It's not in vain. I know that it's for a greater purpose. It's for His purpose. It's for His glory. And I'm just excited to be able to share.